Happy New Week, brothers and sisters, and welcome again to a short devotion. A devotion that is encouraging us to carry what I call the Thor faith. The Thor faith is hereby contrasted with the if faith, which is conditional. The Thor faith tells us that we should trust God regardless of what we face. The if faith says that I will trust God if the circumstances are great for me, and just encouraging us to walk on what we'd call the Thor faith, because we are recognizing first that God is sovereign over the affairs of men and nations, and secondly, because we also we find a lot of security in God that will enable us to stand on times of pressure, and particularly the pressures of the world. And so I am calling us to read the book of Daniel, chapter 3, verse 16 to 18. This is one of the most intriguing books that I like, because it talks about contemporary things and goes all the way to engage men around the time of what is coming, and the fact which is true, the second coming of Christ, which is one of the most important things in life. And if you are like me, you want to keep the main thing, then you are reminded that this life is about worshiping God regardless. And so keeping the main thing, regardless of what you meet. And I'm looking at this story of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Daniel at this point is not mentioned, of course, but we know that he went to captivity together with these three men. And I know this is a story that we have heard a lot of times, and I could probably preach 1,001 sermons around this particular session, which is one of the sessions I like a lot, because I like the courage that these men had. And the courage of these men is a particular courage that we like and we need at such a time as this. The courage that helps us to go through storms and remain intact. The courage that makes a whole nation recognize that there is indeed a people who love their God and are living their lives right. And I think it would be not fair for us if we probably just get the background of what is happening to these three men. King Nebuchadnezzar has already started taking the children of Israel into captivity, and as you may know, they were taken in several times, and Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are among the first few guys who are taken into captivity first, before the rest of the Israel is taken into captivity. And so the king, Nebuchadnezzar, wants these men to serve in his courts. And of course, they are going to be fed. And of course, we know what happens all the way from chapter 1, where they choose not to defile themselves with the foods and the ways of the people of Babylon. When we are coming in chapter 3, the king has just set up a golden statue that he has, said that everyone must worship. And these men seem to have a way of keeping the main thing, which is ideally worshiping God and keeping their conscience clear. And they say that it does not matter what you, king, decide, but we have made a decision that we are not going to worship the golden statue that you have set up, because we know that we have a God. We know what is the main thing for us, and we know how our God is, because we have known. And I think this is just what is going through their minds. They had a good history about their God. I don't know if you and I have our history about the God that we serve, because they had heard the many things that God had done. They had heard that even God, their God is a jealous God, and so he does not share his glory. They had heard that this God had separated the Red Sea into two. They had heard that this God had brought plagues against the Egyptians who chose to go against him. They had heard that this God had redeemed them from the land of slavery all the way into the promised land. They had heard that God, this same God, stopped the rivers of Jordan when they were overflowing so that the children of Israel could go through these waters. They had heard that this same God is the same God that their fathers had passed on to them. And just a thought that creeps into my mind at this point. What kind of God have you passed on to the people behind you? Is it a God who has a history of victory, or a God who has a conditional kind of history, that God who we worship when we are in issues and not when we are happy? If your God is the same God of Israel, the same God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, then I'm encouraging us to carry this courage with us. And this courage is always brought out by what we call the Thor faith. The Thor faith considers God regardless of what life brings. The Thor faith tells us that the God that we serve has been with Kijabe Hospital all the way since the time it was started. For the last 105 years, this God has fought for Kijabe Hospital and has stood with Kijabe Hospital day after another, month after another, year after year, until it has been 105 years. This same God is not just about to let Kijabe Hospital go through turmoil and come down. This God is faithful, and he is willing to walk with us even at such a time. God bless you with the heart of the Thor faith, because at this point, the fate of Kijabe Hospital and the fate of the people around you, the colleagues that you have, has been given all the way into your hands. That there's a time that we cannot give up. A time for us to pray, and a time for us not just to pray for Kijabe Hospital, but also for our country. A time for us to pray for our neighbors, and a time for us to pray for the world. It is a time that all of us, rich and poor, have been pointed towards relying on God and not relying on humanity. And so, yes, the parents and the ancestors of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had relayed a God who is powerful and a God who has always been victorious to their children. And this same God is the same God that we share about today. The God that we can worship because he is sovereign over the affairs of all human beings. There is nothing that escapes his knowledge. Whatever happens in and out of every coming day and weeks, God has seen it, and he is totally aware of our plight. God even saw this before it came to be, and God ordained that it would be you at this particular place, because God does not choose not to serve you or walk with you, because of where you are. Times we even find ourselves in the wrong places, but he still chooses to walk with us. He still chooses to fight our battles. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are a great example for us here. They are probably in a place where it is not even in their land of birth. It is a place of captivity, and they are going to be serving a king who is pagan. And they choose that regardless of the circumstances, I will worship my God. This is what we call the Thor faith. Someone shared faith as believing and trusting that God is able to do what we want him to do, even if he chooses not to. Because times, God can choose not to do what we want him to do because it is not in his will. James talks about the reason why God does not answer our prayers times is because we are praying our will and we are not considering his will. And a lot of times, I know it has been preached to you that God's will is good, it is pleasing, and it is perfect. And so times we want our way, but God is reminding us that my way is safe because I am sovereign, not just over the affairs of men, but the affairs of all creation. I am sovereign over the reasons and motives of humanity. And so I know that whichever direction I give you is safe. And so times we can get to such places as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are in. And you see, it is very easy for us to say that I don't think I am willing to walk this path, and so probably just give up. Probably choose to even go to the way of betraying others. I'm looking at these guys as the kind of friends that you are supposed to be having, because it was easy for one of them to say, all right, I recant this faith, and it would have made, you know, the faith of the others falter. But all of them seem to be people of one mind, people of the right kind of purpose that they are working towards, and they work together all the way to the end. The king is not bluffing. The king is just about to throw them into a burning furnace. But they stand and tell the king, and they give him this kind of definition of faith. We know our God is able to do it, but even if he chooses not to do it, we still believe he is able to do it. And this is ideally my sharing. I do not know if COVID-19 is going to find me. I don't know if it is going to find you. But even at that point, will you still walk with God? Will you still trust that God is able to even bring healing upon you? I don't know if it is going to push me to where we are all afraid of. But even at that point, are you going to deny or betray God? Or are you going to stand your ground? Are you going to carry the Thor faith? Or are you going to carry what we would call the faith of convenience? That I love God so long as I am not getting hurt physically. I will love God so long as I am not, confronted towards death. I love God, and probably a lot of times have to be pushed to the wall so that we realize that every other thing around us has failed. So that is the time that we call on God. God requires us to walk with him and trust the decisions that he makes over our lives are the right decision, whether we like them or not. Trusting that our lives are led of God is ideally carrying the courage that we need in life. First, because God is sovereign over the affairs of all men, the affairs of all nations, the affairs of all creation. God is sovereign because he is the creator. And if we have looked at his history, then we will realize that he has never failed, not even a single day. And secondly, he gives us a security that is sure. Recently, I shared about the open grave of Christ. And I shared that the open grave of Christ was open not for Christ to come out, but for us to see that we are safe in his arms, that he has indeed resurrected. And because he has resurrected, he has overcome the evil of death and the evil of sin. And so if we trust him, it is going to be well with us. And this is my encouragement to us. Our security is only in God. And so we will carry, and we should carry the faith, the Thor faith instead of the if faith, because God guarantees us of a security that is sure, a security that has been tested through history, that has been tested through even the present, and that has already even been tested in future. And God has already given us a victory that beyond this life we will be safe with him. I encourage you, brother and my sister, that carrying the Thor faith is going to be the only option for us if we want to live courageous lives and if we want to stand the test of time. Our Christianity is for it has been tested all the way from the past to this present, and God is going to be faithful to us as we stand. We see the example of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Even at the depth of all heat, Christ decided to stand with them, and God will stand with us regardless of what we face. God will stand with us. And so, my brothers and sisters, let us carry the Thor faith and walk into this new week with all victory, with all courage, and with all assurance that God is going to be with us, that he will never leave us, that he will never forsake us. Let us carry the Thor faith and share that God is able God is able. God is able. God be with you and God bless you.